What if the Confederacy had actually won the American Civil War? Would slavery have survived into the 20th century? Would the United States even exist as we know it? Or would North America be a fractured continent, vulnerable to foreign powers? In this video, we'll dive deep into one of history's most fascinating what-if scenarios: a Confederate victory in the Civil War. We'll explore the political, military, and cultural ripple effects, from how the war might have been won to the fate of enslaved people, to how a divided America would have reshaped global history. If you're a history buff who loves myth-busting, surprising details, and immersive storytelling, stick around, because this alternate timeline will challenge everything you thought you knew about the Civil War. Part 1. The War That Almost Wasn't, Setting the Stage. The Civil War wasn't inevitable. Before the first shots at Fort Sumter in April 1861, countless compromises had been made to hold the fragile Union together. But slavery, the root of the conflict, was tearing the nation apart. The Confederacy's chances of victory weren't hopeless. In fact, many historians argue the South didn't need to conquer the North. It simply needed to survive. Much like the American colonies in the Revolutionary War, the Confederacy hoped that dragging out the fight would eventually exhaust the Union's will. Fun fact: at the war's outset, both Abraham Lincoln and Jefferson Davis believed the war would be over in a matter of months. Few could imagine it lasting 4 bloody years and costing more American lives than any other conflict in U.S. history. Part 2. Paths to a Confederate Victory. So how could the Confederacy have actually won? Let's break down the possibilities. Option 1. Foreign recognition. The Confederacy banked heavily on European support. Britain and France, both reliant on Southern cotton, considered recognizing the Confederacy. Had they done so, sending weapons, ships, or even troops, the balance of power could have shifted dramatically. But here's a mythbuster. Britain's textile industry had already stockpiled cotton, and alternative sources like Egypt and India were emerging. Plus, Britain's strong anti-slavery movement made aligning with the Confederacy politically risky. Still, one dramatic Confederate victory, say at Gettysburg or Antietam, might have swayed European powers. Option 2. A decisive battlefield victory. Gettysburg is often cited as the Confederacy's high watermark. Had Robert E. Lee smashed Union forces in Pennsylvania in 1863, he could have threatened Philadelphia, Baltimore, or even Washington, D.C. The political fallout might have forced Lincoln to the negotiating table. Option 3. Northern fatigue. The Civil War was unpopular in parts of the North. Copperheads, Northern Democrats opposed to the war, rallied against Lincoln's policies. If Union casualties mounted and victories stalled, public pressure might have ended the war in favor of peace negotiations. Part 3. The Confederacy secedes permanently. Let's imagine it's 1865, but instead of surrender at Appomattox, the Union recognizes the Confederacy as an independent nation. What happens next? Political landscape. The Confederate States of America, CSA, would likely include the original 11 secessionist states, possibly joined by border states like Kentucky and Missouri. The Union would remain, but deeply weakened. Its westward expansion and industrial dominance would face stiff challenges. 2 Americas. Instead of one United States, you'd have 2 rival nations sharing the same continent. Both would claim the mantle of the American Revolution, both competing for legitimacy. Part 4. The fate of slavery. Here's where things get dark. Would slavery survive? Almost certainly, at least for decades. The Confederate Constitution explicitly protected slavery. Leaders like Jefferson Davis and Alexander Stephens considered slavery the very foundation of their society. But slavery also faced growing international pressure. By the mid-19th century, most of the Western world had abolished it. Britain had ended slavery in 1833, France in 1848, and even Brazil, the last major holdout, abolished slavery in 1888. The Confederacy might have clung to the institution, but economic and diplomatic realities suggest it would have faced isolation. Over time, slavery may have collapsed under international sanctions, boycotts, or internal uprisings. Fun fact: Stevens, the Confederate vice president, famously declared that slavery was the cornerstone of the Confederacy. It wasn't about states' rights. It was explicitly about preserving racial hierarchy. Part 5. Native Nations and Expansion. Another overlooked consequence: Native Americans. Both the Union and Confederacy wanted to expand westward. The Confederacy already courted alliances with some tribes, promising autonomy in exchange for loyalty. In a divided America, Native nations might have been caught in the middle, manipulated, betrayed, or even exploited more brutally than in our timeline. Part 6. The Global Stage. Had the Confederacy survived, the ripple effects would have been global. World wars without the United States. Without a unified America, the 20th century looks radically different. Would a divided North America have intervened in World War I? Unlikely. The Confederacy, reliant on slavery and agriculture, lacked the industrial might of the Union. The U.S. as we know it, the arsenal of democracy, might never have existed. That means Germany could have won World War I, and without a powerful U.S. to counter Nazi Germany or Imperial Japan, World War II might have ended in Axis victory. Myth-busting insight. The United States' rise to superpower status wasn't guaranteed. It depended on unity, industrial strength, and a massive labor force. Advantages a divided America might never have had. Part 7. Culture and Identity. A Confederate victory would have also reshaped culture. Instead of American identity, you'd have two competing national myths. The Union might double down on industry, immigration, and modernization. The Confederacy would cling to tradition, agriculture, and rigid racial hierarchy. Pop culture, literature, even the concept of freedom would carry radically different meanings depending on which flag you saluted. Part 8. Long-term consequences. Let's push this timeline forward. By the early 20th century, the Confederacy might still cling to slavery, or transition into a system of sharecropping and segregation even harsher than Jim Crow. The Union, weakened and resentful, might eventually reignite war. A second American Civil War in the early 1900s isn't far-fetched. Globally, European powers, especially Britain, France, and Spain, might exploit the divided continent, carving out spheres of influence. In short, a Confederate victory doesn't just change America, it changes the entire world. So what if the Confederacy had won the Civil War? The short answer: the world would look drastically different, darker, more divided, and far less free. Slavery might have lasted longer, the United States might never have become a global superpower, and the 20th century's wars might have ended in ways too grim to imagine. But here's the real lesson. The Union victory wasn't just a military triumph. It was a turning point for democracy, human rights, and the future of the modern world. History could have gone another way, but it didn't. And that's worth remembering. If you enjoyed this deep dive into alternate history, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more immersive explorations of the past and the what-ifs that keep history buffs up at night.